The Sober Sojourns 12 Steps and Passport Stamps podcast features recovered men and women who are practicing members of Alcoholics Anonymous. We do not claim to represent Alcoholics Anonymous or any 12 step program. We are friends gathered to discuss our experience in recovery. The discussions in this podcast represent our own individual experiences and opinions as of today.
You can reach us at our email address, sobersojournspodcast@gmail.com, or Instagram at oivea and at Sally. We would love to hear from you. Our aim is to try and be helpful by sharing the realities of our recovery, how we have recovered, and are trudging the road of happy destiny wherever we go.
Pirate Mike and OIVAA presents The Sober Sojourns 12 Steps and Passport Stamps podcast.
Welcome back to Sober Sojourns, 12 Steps and Passport Stamps. I'm OIVAA.
And I'm Pirate Mike.
And we have with us, I'm very excited about this for personal friendship reasons, but we have the Big Book Thumper.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yay!
Whoop, whoop. Oh man, this is great. This is exciting because so the story with me and you has been that we met I think through the meme page, which is just wild. Like, I don't know if you know this part, Mike. We started talking through we DM'd each other. I don't know what the first message was. I don't know what happened there. But then we realized, oh, do we go to are we in the same circle? Do we both go to like the Black Rhinos? And then we realized we actually, we hang out with the same crowd, but you are my friend, and this is like the big thing to say, and then probably just put aside because we'll get too emotional. We are both recovered Jews.
Yeah.
Am I outing you as Jewish?
No, that's okay. I think I'm pretty out about it, like since I found your Instagram. But that's actually how that started. I saw like a Jewish recovery page and I immediately DM'd you and I was like, hello.
Excuse me.
Yeah. Literally,
man.
who are you?
Because like you have to understand, if there is a spectrum of being Jewish, me and the Big Book Thumper are very obscenely Jewish. We're very, very
obscenely Jewish.
Yes, yes, that is accurate.
We're like a Jew is a Jew is a Jew, right?
Yeah.
We all control the world in the same kind. We're all connected, but me and the Big Book Thumper are very Jewish.
Yeah, we control the weather together, and
we have a whole thing going on with the weather.
Well, if that's the case, I have a strongly worded letter that I want to submit. There's some improvements on this side of the world.
Oh man, it's rainy season with you, right? Also, yeah. What happened to the sentence? I'm sorry, I didn't speak English. It's also rainy season where you're at, right, Mike?
It is, yeah. Okay. It is, and if there was any doubt, we have a couple of typhoons that rolled in and flash flooding, so I think it's pretty.
Oh man!
But it's fine. Actually, so I'm curious. Since Big Book Thumper, you said that OIVAA's IG popped up for you. That's what because I'm old, right? So I'm curious how the the wizards at IG make that happen. I mean, you think it's like hashtag magic, or just like it knew to put you together?
I think that like the algorithm or the FBI guy in our phones or whatever you want to call it, just like figured out that we were both probably in the same circle, and we both follow like the same kind of people, like you and a few of our friends. Yeah. So like it suggested OIVAA. Like I saw that username and I was like, beg pardon, and then I looked at the meme page and I was like, beg pardon. Like.
Oh, I got. So it's like a suggested page. I thought maybe one of her posts like found its way into your. Well, either way, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I was weirded out at first because I'm like, another Jew in the I don't know if I want part of me thought was like, do I want to know another Jew that's recovered? That's too weird.
Yeah.
Whenever you say that though, like another Jew in the program, I mean, I guess it's like, so it's a niche of a niche, right? Because like I do know other Jews in the
I
program.
mean, I know a lot. I mean, half of Israel is Jews in the program, but there's a difference. Oh
But
God.
it's that difference. I mean, what I can just compare it to is just finding another recovered person
Yes.
in open AA. Like
There we
that's
go.
literally all that it like you go to an open AA meeting, like a clubhouse Friday night meeting, and everybody's gonna be talking about, meeting maker stuff. And then you hear one
Right.
person in the back of the room go like, "Hey, I'm so and so and I'm a recovered alcoholic." It's like, oh my God,
There we
So
go.
that's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's what we had. I also know other Jews in the program, but it's like someone who knows the big book.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a nice, I think, mishmash that you and I both share. Thumper, Th Thump. I don't know how to call you. Uh, the, Thumper. I don't know. It's anyway. Yeah, there's that, and you meet exactly how to describe it, right? There's like you meet another recovered person in OpenAA, and then also we have like the same cultural like references, and it's like wild, and we both go through very similar experiences given the current state of the world, and we both can share that with each other, and recognize, like, confront all sorts of things together. So it's just like, it's like finding pirate Mike. Here's how I can compare it for you. Okay, let's. Oh no, it's like you find someone, okay, in OpenAA that's a really old timer like you,
Oh,
okay,
nice. Thank you.
and also they have 25 adopted dogs.
Okay, I get it.
You get it now?
So it speaks to my heart. Yeah.
I don't know. I-
No, that is pretty, like we just did in the meeting that you mentioned, Black Rhino's International Big Book Study on Wednesday nights Eastern. We
7:30
just
Eastern. Come check us
there we
out.
go. I forgot the time. We just did a vision for you, right? So I keep on going back to the fellowship that you crave,
Yeah.
and that's what makes it extra special. Oh, that's awesome.
Oh man. Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm honestly, the Big Book Thumper here is one of my favorite people. Not just because we're just like every time we discover something that like we both have in common, which is the craziest, most fringe shit, but just the soul that she is, and that you are. I can speak to you now, and just the kindness, and the work that you do in the fellowship, and yeah, just the service that you are an embodiment of is inspiring to me, and I wish I could be more like you.
So sweet, and thank you. And this is like what's so great about AA, and I think that this is kind of a greater topic, like how the fellowship has grown thanks to Zoom, and what a great thing that is. Like I think
Yeah.
if you go back out there into open AA meeting maker world, a lot of the old timers are going to be like, the Zoom thing is not real, and then like
Yeah.
you need to suit up and show up. Where does it say that suit up and show? Is that like
Yeah.
the daily reflections or something, like wherever does it say that? Like no, the big book, like the foreword to the fourth edition, actually talks about modem to modem and how that
Mhm.
is life-saving for some people. And I've just had that experience. And same thing with the coming into Rhinos. It's also someone that I met on Instagram who led me to, there, and who introduced me to the whole gang. And it's like, thank you. Like Agent X always says, like this whole thing is like a bat signal for AA members who
Yeah.
understand the big book, that we were able to
Mm.
find each other all around the world.
A
Yeah.
bad signal. I love it. Oh
Yeah.
man, Thumper, me and you can like build I don't know, what's the most Jewish, like a Star of David. Like no, that might be too controversial. I don't know, like a mezuzah. Like a giant mezuzah. Anyway, enough with the this episode can get derailed really quick with references that no one's gonna understand. So I'm gonna
No,
put it
that's not
aside. Sorry.
the real
So
ones will know.
yeah,
Yes.
if you know, you know. Okay, if you know, you know. But I feel like your experience is so interesting. Like I've heard your story. I mean, we have conversations and I've heard it in a context of the meeting and that's super interesting. But I feel like to our podcast, it's super interesting as well because I mean, you might not sound like it, but you're Latina, my friend.
Yes, yes,
You're
I am.
you're like
Born
telling
in
her.
Yes, I'm
Like
being
you're Latina.
informed.
When I say you don't sound like it, I mean you don't have an accent, but you were born in South America, right? And you grew up there. Why are you laughing? Why am I sounding like a horrible?
No. It's. I'm going back to the. It's like, yeah, like
Jesus.
what BBT said. You're informing her the way that it sounded. It's like, by the way, you are
I'm sorry,
Latina.
BBT. Okay, fine. That's
I'm gonna go with that. I'm gonna change it up
yeah.
every
Okay.
single time.
You
I
know
love
what?
that.
It's great.
But my favorite thing, because okay, like ever since I came into the program, I've gone to a lot of American meetings online. You know, most of my like Zoom friends are from the States or you know from the States and now live somewhere else. And like I always get that, like, where are you from? Because they can hear just a little something in my accent, but it's like they can't tell what. And then oh yeah, you just like made my day when you were like, no, you sound like you're like from Brooklyn, like from Williamsburg. Like you
Yeah,
sound
you
like
literally sound like Yiddish is your first language. Like that's what you sound like. That's
I
why
love
people
that.
can't place you. Yeah, and I love that accent. I wish I sounded like that, but like you can definitely hear that I'm from Israel. Like as much as I want to sound like different shades of Jewish, like it's oh no, yeah, okay, you're from Tel Aviv. Got it. Oh man. Yeah, it's great. So wait, let's put how many languages do you speak? How many
So
languages can you say confidently you speak? Let's
confidently, I would say three, and then two that
Hmm.
I'm like mildly confident in, you know.
I feel like I would give you four for my for me knowing you, I would say four, but you know, if you want to downplay it, sure.
You're so funny. You're revealing more about herself than she even knows in like
No, she knows. You see,
the
this
last
is
20
where
minutes.
I have to again like put a little asterisk here. We're very good friends, so I'm allowed to.
Yes,
No, I mean,
yes.
I feel the love. No, and I appreciate the affection, but it's like things I learned today on the podcast. I am Latina. Like
I'm
Yiddish is my
Latina.
first language. I can
And I
speak
sound
four
like
languages from the
I
heart.
Yiddish, okay? Yeah. No, but this is the chutzpah, you know? This is why I sound like I'm from Israel, which I am. Oh man, but it's really interesting that like so we had several, you know, conversations about languages because we're both, you know, into that and translation stuff. And I've been wanting to have like a more about translation episode. And I feel like, you know, I want to hear more about your experience and I want to obviously hear about what that move and cultural shift was like, you know, and what it is like for you in the program. But also you have a very interesting experience with taking people through the big book in different languages, which I have not had yet. I feel like I would go into a stroke if I have to take someone through the big book in Hebrew. I read it for this, like I went through some of that and I'm like, okay, this is too weird. Ugh. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, I understand that feeling. And you know, I came into AA, into Zoom, Open AA, did American meetings. And so my first experience with the Big Book was in English. I'm comfortable enough in English. That's how eventually I went through the Big Book and recovered. And then when I started working with others, got into the Big Book in English. And I live in a predominantly French speaking part of the world. And so I speak French, went to school in French, but never really touched AA in French, went to a few local meetings, and I found it weird, like just the Serenity Prayer in French. I was like, what is
Yeah.
this? And then hearing the steps in French, I was like, this is so weird. And then when I was around 6 months sober, I traveled to Germany and Switzerland to make amends to some family there, and that's when I was exposed to German speaking AA, which like my German is somewhere between like basic and medium because I do speak Yiddish and it's very similar. And I
Yeah.
found it to be less of a freaky translation. I think because German is more similar to
Mm.
English, like the language kind of frazzled me a little bit less. And then I started working with somebody. She spoke well enough English that we were able to mostly work in English, but we did take a look at the German big book, and I just found it to be a very good working translation, you know? And then when I came back, it opened up my mind to look more at the French meetings, look at the French big book, and I started working with others in French. And then my local fellowship has a whole bunch of languages. Just in my area, there's English, French, Spanish, Russian meetings. And so I
Yeah.
started going to one of the Spanish meetings, and I loved the Spanish Big Book. I found it to be a fantastic translation. For the fourth
Yeah.
edition, they reconciled all of the pages. So the Spanish translation is also 164 pages. It's page per page of the English translation, which I found to be just amazing. And now I've had the experience of taking two people through the Spanish Big Book, and yeah, like by far, German and Spanish I've found to be fantastic translations. The French one, honestly, I this is just like my personal opinion, not that it matters, but I didn't find it to be such a working translation of the Big Book. I don't know why. Also because fun fact, French has less words than the English language, so it takes more words to express an idea that in English could be just one word. So, you know, the Big Book in English total pages is 500 and something pages. The French Big Book is closer to 700 pages because of that.
Wow.
Oh, including the
Yeah.
story. Okay, so they even translated the stories.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying about the weirdness of it. Like, for me, the first time I heard the Serenity Prayer in English, I was weirded out, because I got used to the Hebrew Serenity Prayer, which is different a little bit, especially because when we say Serenity Prayer in Hebrew, we don't say God, we say another word. It's Eli. Eli, it's basically my God. So we say my God, which is a small difference, but a huge difference, you
Yeah,
know, if
yeah.
you want to get into it. But there's so many small things. And I like that you mentioned the Spanish because it's an interesting experience. I got to you know, hear a lot of the big book in Spanish. I took someone through the steps. I mean, you know, one of the many people who ghosted me in the fourth step, but we started doing it, and basically I was reading it in English and she was reading it in Spanish, and we went back and forth between the two languages, and I found that I liked it. I liked the translation. It felt to me almost, I don't know if you'll agree with this, it felt me almost like we were reading the NA basic text in the way that it was less poetic than the big book. Do you know what I mean? Like it was more of like the words they chose to use were more straightforward words
Oh,
to
that's a good way to
me
put
than
it.
how I felt, like than the old timey. I don't know. Did you get that feeling?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. I got that feeling too from the Spanish and from the German. That's what I found,
Hmm.
that it was like very straightforward. And then this is probably like my beef with the French Big Book, that it's actually very poetic, very drawn out. They embellished the sentences. They chose the
Oh,
prettiest words that they could choose to express ideas. And that's what it felt like with the different translations that I've witnessed. But yeah, I felt that too with the Spanish Big Book, that it was very straightforward, very matter of fact. But I like that, particularly in the doctor's
Yeah.
opinion. The first time that I took somebody through the Big Book in Spanish, I actually found myself having a new experience and a new understanding with the doctor's opinion because of these like particular choices of words and kind of
Mm.
old-timey medical terms that I didn't even know in Spanish, but that I immediately like understood and were so specific. Yeah.
That's super fucking interesting. Like, because obviously, there's this whole, you know, linguistics is a whole area, not just like the actual words, but also like what it does in your brain to
yeah.
speak a certain language or a lot of languages. So I'm imagining like the experience of being recovered in a certain language. I mean, like I feel like this could be like a whole season, you know, because it's so interesting. Certain words that are changed or not changed or translated or mistranslated. You know, obviously once you take a piece of work and you translate it and retranslate it, it's going to create inconsistencies, hopefully not too many. But yeah, pardon my any experience with the Tagalog version of the big book you want to share?
I'm actually listening intently because it's the way that you guys described it. No, there's similar. There is a Tagalog translation of the Big Book, just the 164. And
Yeah.
not too long ago, they started up a meeting here locally where everything's in Tagalog language, so they read, the readings are in Tagalog too. And immediately, what people noticed was something like you guys described. I'll just focus on the word that they used for the word alcoholic. It seemed to it was so straightforward that it seemed to like really hit people in the core. There was an emotional like reaction that a lot of people were having just from the use of that word. Whereas, if they identified as an alcoholic or an addict, like in English language, then it almost felt like a throwaway term. But this was like, oof, why would they say that? It's like it hits to the core of me. So I think that
Mm.
I agree with what you guys saying. There is power in language and the use of words. Like it can evoke certain like feelings, and you can have a
Yeah.
totally different experience. Even in English, as much as people used to tell me, and there's probably truth, like don't spend too much time being sensitive to things like tone and the use of words, like the diction of it, but it's all designed to produce some kind of experience,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know? So
absolutely.
even within the English translation of the Big Book, in another meeting, we were going through, what's that chapter, to employers. And something that we talked about was that, if you're paying attention, the tone of the writing changes because it was written by somebody else. And so, it's not as
Yeah.
gentle, it's not as like, and um, even if you're trying to focus in on the principles, you can't help but pay attention to the delivery of it.
Yeah. It's like the Bible, right?
Mm,
Because I'm gonna compare the big book. I always say don't stop
sure.
comparing the big book to the Bible. No, because you look at the Bible, right? And like, or I'm speaking about the Torah, the Jewish Bible. Like it's so like, it's very much the same. And then you get to the Song of Songs, and then it's just like like a collection of love songs. That's Two Employers. Two
Oh,
Employers is Song of Songs. Uh, you know, challenge
but
me about
but
it.
it sounds like in the opposite direction, where two
In the
employers is
opposite
like
direction,
more
which
serious
is
all of a sudden. Yeah. Yeah.
well, or Psalms, Tehillim, Psalms is written in a much higher
Yeah.
form of ancient Hebrew, and very also very different, right? It's almost like here's a series of like I don't know, 100 and I don't know how many Tehillim are there, like 134 or something haikus.
Mhm.
DM us for how many Tehillim, how many Psalms are there, and win a prize. One of Pirate Mike's dogs. What
Nope. Immediately
are
gonna veto that.
17 dogs?
Never enough. That's how needy
Oh
I
man.
am.
Dude, one is too many, and a
I'm
thousand is never enough.
the different languages. What are so in the Filipino meeting, if they just go straight with the readings and the kind of mood that it evokes, it very quickly becomes like a very solemn and almost like grave meeting. I think it's heavy. The
Hmm.
language is heavy.
Yeah.
It's like deeper Tagalog. It's not casual words that they're using, and I find that that changes the tone of the meeting. So in you guys' experience, whether it's the German, the Spanish, or the French version, does it do the same thing? Does it produce like a certain mood if you just go straight?
Yeah, I think so. I think I saw that difference with the Spanish versus like the French. Like the Spanish Big Book is very matter of fact, uses a lot of terms that I mean, of course, like every Spanish speaking country is very different in the way that they use words. Like in some countries, they'll use some words very casually, and then in other countries they'll almost never use that word outside of like its particular
Yeah.
context. And so with the Spanish translation, it feels like whenever they read out of the big book, it's like it's very serious, and people talk about the specific experience because the words are very specific. Whereas in the French big book, because it's so poetic and drawn out, it almost feels like people go with their interpretation of it a lot more. So that has been very, very
Huh.
interesting. Like going to a Spanish big book study versus a French big book study. I've found just like in my personal experience and opinion seeping in that the French meetings will have a lot more of meeting maker stuff because people are sharing their interpretation of what these like 3 sentences to explain alcoholic insanity mean, you know?
Huh.
Whereas in the Spanish, it'll be like 1 sentence, this is what alcoholic insanity is, very
Got
little
it.
up to
Mhm.
interpretation. You either have this experience or you don't, you know?
Yeah, because it's not a Shakespearean play. Like, you read Bill's story and I'm like, what is this? What? I love Bill's story. Honestly, it's one of my favorite chapters, but I'm like, this is a story, and I feel like, as you said, um big that that it's much more straightforward. I think I noticed like so there's a few things I like to point out, I guess. So I have like small stuff that I've noticed. I'm not even gonna touch too much on the NA translation of the basic text because that was done later. I think, or I actually don't know, but it also has some weird stuff. But in the Hebrew version, I have some stuff actually saved here. So the third step, right? We decide to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. So the word care is not translated to care in Hebrew. It's
Oh,
translated to another word. That word is hashgacha. Now, to me, hashgacha has a very negative context because hashgacha in Hebrew is supervising. I think when they
oh,
translated it, they meant as providence. That's why because it can be providence as well. Um, but it's basically supervision, hashgacha, and I hated that my first year because I was looking for every excuse to get the fuck off this train, but I hated that word and I clung on to that word. I'm like,
yeah.
why? And when I read care, I was like, to the care of God. Oh, okay. I'm not in this supervision. Like, oh, okay. Like I had something clicked for me then.
Okay, but I love that. Like something just clicked for me. I absolutely want like to be under the hashgacha of God. Oh my God. Thank you for sharing that. Holy shit.
You see, this is the joy of it because both, I had a certain thing right in my life experience and I just hated that word and I had negative connotations with it. But now I'm telling you this thing in Hebrew, which is a language obviously you're connected to through your Judaism, and you're like, oh, I love it. This is why this is the joy of this episode, I feel like, because there's so many small things and I'm just like, oh, this is amazing.
That's really
And
important though. I mean,
it is.
does that then affect the attitude that a person would have going through the book in Hebrew and like because yeah, care and supervision are two very different ways
Yeah.
that something is hovering above you, right? And so that could
Yeah.
that could inform your approach to it or your attitude towards it. And that's what I'm curious about. So is that something that you noticed, Faye? Like because of that, then people
Um,
treat higher power as more of like a supervisory entity.
I mean, I feel like everyone that comes in have some sort of quarrel with a higher power, right? That was at least my experience in Israel, especially when it's a country where there is no separation of synagogue and state, right? Uh, see what I did there? Nice. So I found that everyone had some sort of quarrel with it. But I think that at the end of the day, if you are unwilling uh, to believe at all, you're going to find every excuse. It doesn't matter the language. Like that's what I think, as much as this is super interesting, and I do believe that, and I can tell you from just my experience of speaking several languages, like I really believe that it changes you and your understanding and how you see the world. But at the end of the day, this is an international cross-culture thing. So I want to believe that the message for a person who really had the miracle of suffering enough it doesn't matter what translation errors were made or not made. Yeah, so that's kind of my take on it in general.
Yeah. But I have to say, like, I just have to like give a shout out to NA because I feel like particularly like as big book people, it's easy to like shit on it because I when I came in, I did AA and then I was like, let me try out NA, for a little bit. And there was an NA meeting that I used to go to regularly and I loved it. And I loved the readings. They were like just different enough from the AA readings, just a little bit. It felt like more open in certain ways. And then in the basic text, like I just loved so many things, particularly about step 3 and about step 11. I love what the basic text says about those two steps. And I love the NA third step prayer. It was my third step prayer for the longest time. And yeah.
Is it the
I
same
still do
spirit?
that, by the way, every morning.
The NA third stepper?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Is it the same spirit as the AA one, or like a, you know what I mean? Like,
I Yeah, I found that it's like the spirit is very much there. I love it. At least the version that I know is God, take my will in my life, guide me in my recovery, show me how to live. And I just love that prayer, adore it. And it was funny. Like I shared with my sponsor, who's very much a big book person, that I love that step and I use that step. And she's like, but it doesn't have the part about bearing witness, and that's so vital. And I'm like, okay, I hear you,
Hmm.
but also I love this prayer.
Oh, here we go. I have something,
oh,
a small something about it, about the third step prayer, because again, this is the most preparation I've done for an episode, and it's still not enough. I have here okay, so this is the AA Big Book in Hebrew, which, by the way, I have a lot to say about price differences in the AA Big Book website because different big books in different languages have different prices, which is a whole other thing we're gonna say for the end of the episode because it's fucking hilarious. But here, so we know obviously bondage of self, right? Relieve me of the bondage of self. Here, for some reason, they didn't use the word bondage. They literally said the word shi'abud le'atzmi, which basically means being a slave to oneself, which is interesting. So it's not self-bondage, it's like you're enslaved to yourself, which
it's
I really
heavier.
like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I enjoy that. I think that's a great one. And oh, there's another one. Wait. Oh, okay. Here's the most interesting one I found. So in the version that I found, the free PDF version on Israel AA website, shout out, I guess. I don't know. Uh, it's fine. I've never been to AA in Israel. I was introduced to AA like in English. The whole of AA that I knew, or like the steps that I knew, was NA. So this is different. But here, so the NA version has prayer and meditation in the 11th step. Here, it says in a way of prayer, and it's a word, the word is hirurim. Hirurim basically means thoughts, ideas, deep thoughts. So I don't know why they rejected the concept of meditation, maybe because it was too
Huh.
not Jewish, even though Jewish meditation is a big thing and it has been for like the better part of like 3,000 years. But they kind of rejected that word and they went with another, which I want to hear the story behind because it was bound to be this meeting where people were like, "What? No!" And yeah, so there was this argument. So I feel like this is a whole history, just these few things that I pointed out.
It's pretty
Yeah, but I
awesome.
feel like it goes back to that thing that we say a lot in AA, like we turn our will in our lives or our thoughts and our actions. I've heard that even my sponsor, who's very big book, says that, and I feel like it's kind of like
Hmm.
a simplification. Like if will and life sounds too vague, then thoughts and actions, right? So that would make sense in
Yeah.
the 11th step too.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And they play around with that a lot in the big book. And um I hear what you're saying, like overall, if you're somebody who's sitting down on the other side of the table and you're receiving the message, you're either accepting it or rejecting it, or maybe somewhere in between, right? There's grace.
Yeah.
But in terms of the delivery, I like my experience currently, as someone who's trying to draw more from the book, it does change, right? So in the beginning, they'll use words like the care of God as we understand him. And for me, the care of, because it's not so strict, it gives me a lot more like latitude for
Yeah.
interpretation. But then you go further into the book and towards the end, and then it changes to language like, we alcoholics are undisciplined, so we let God discipline us in this way,
Yeah.
which is, there's less room there. And I think that it allows for like something, the assumption is that something would have changed in that time. So now the idea of discipline isn't something that we recoil from a hot flame. Like we might actually appreciate it in terms of the inspiration that it might give us as we're trying to walk the path.
Yeah.
So,
Ooh.
right. So like um, so I get that. And then, and that speaks to the use of language, something that you said in one of the earlier episodes, Vey, I think like in terms of being able to speak different languages is, what was the phrasing? Like words that
Hmm.
you can speak from the heart. And I
I
think that
did.
that's
You're
something, no,
paraphrasing, but okay. You say
it's,
what.
it's something to that effect. And I was like, oh yeah, because there's a difference in being conversant in a certain language and then being able to
Oh yeah, yeah.
communicate thoughts. And so like I have some experience with the Tagalog Big Book that I can talk about anecdotally, but I can't actually like sit in a meeting and share in Tagalog.
Yeah. Yes, I have the same experience. Like the English Big Book, I can quote you whole pages by heart. Like I can talk solely out of the Big Book. The only words that will come out of my mouth would be Big Book, like if I'm doing AA in English. But I don't have that level of literacy in any of the other languages that I speak in regards to the Big Book. So that's what I've found, like myself just speaking a lot more from my experience and from the heart,
Mm,
or from how I can translate the concepts that I know in English. And I actually found weirdly that makes it like more authentic, you
Yeah.
know? Mm.
super. I didn't think about it like that because I always see it as like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a detriment. Is that the word when it's like a bad thing?
Hmm.
I don't know. I'm like making up words and I don't know the context now. But I always thought of it as like a bad thing because I always thought, oh, like I'm not as familiar with the language of like the fellowship or the language of recovery in this, in this language, like how can I effectively do it? And like the way you're describing it, the book is that there is no there is dude, this name is like difficult to find a nickname for. I'm sorry. The point is that yeah, and I like how you look at it because I always looked at it as like, oh, I don't know like all the ways to describe whatever mental obsession in Yiddish or whatever. By the way, I just checked, there is no Yiddish version of the Big Book, which is outrageous.
Well, that's probably, I mean, I find that that's relieving. Like we haven't had a need for that, thank God. Like
Oh yeah. I mean, I bet no one would. I bet if you and I were to walk into the service, to the office, the World Services in New York and offer to translate the Big Book into Yiddish for them, they'll be thrilled. Um,
They'll be
you'll
thrilled.
do you'll do most of the work. I'll just be like, oh, that's how it is in Hebrew. Just it's the same.
Oh, man.
Hey.
This is great. This is great. Because I mean, even as we're giving examples, it's presented as like small things, but I do find every example that you guys have given to be substantial in the way that it can change the
Mm.
delivery, and with all of this, I'm making the assumption that it's presentation and reception of like people who are wanting to pay attention to it, and then it really takes on like a different meaning. Like Fumpy, when you were talking about the French translation, I had that locked and loaded.
Thank you.
It sounds like they made a conscious decision. We don't know, but the way that I heard it, they made a conscious decision to lean into like the flowery and metaphorical aspect of it. And then, like you said in the meeting, um, without even thinking about it, maybe some people are now more given to talking about their interpretation of things, like speaking metaphorically as opposed to straightforwardly, which you might find in like the Spanish language meetings. So
Yeah, yeah.
you know, it's a big thing.
Mhm. Yeah, it is, and it really isn't. And it kind of sucks to see that and say that, but at least like where I live, and I know a few people who are involved like on a district and area level, so they see kind of the stats in all of the different language meetings, and the French language AA locally is the weakest AA by far. They've had
Oh,
drops
wow.
in attendance, in meetings, like by far. The English has been steady. They've had more and more recoveries, more and more big book people, more and more meetings. And for the French, it's actually been like a steady decline for like years. I'm very close with my DCM, and that's kind of what she reports back. Like the French meetings, they just kind of keep going downhill. And I was uh
Mm.
I was living in a smaller town that was primarily French speaking by very far. The only meetings around were French. And I mean, walking into that meeting, it was like, am I even in an A meeting? Are we even talking about alcoholism? Are these people even alcoholics? Which is a feeling that we can have in open AA anyway. But it was like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, and then I came in with this like Zoom big book experience. And when I was talking to people locally, it was like so foreign to them. They were like, no, you can't do the steps until you're at least a year sober. And no, you can't say do what it says in the big book. It's too much for a newcomer. And they're like, no, like there wasn't even a thought to follow what the big book says, even if the big book is, in my opinion, already diluted in French anyway. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's something that's kind of weird, and I don't know if that's just here locally or if they may have the same thing in France and in Belgium. Like I don't know.
No, I think that's everywhere. I mean, we don't have our shit together enough for me to be able to present the same stats, right? But from what I've seen, like the Tagalog translation of the big book, um, if you're somebody who has like I don't really feel the best about doing this, but let's say you have a high bottom experience, like
Yeah.
the straightforwardness of the Tagalog text might actually turn you off, right? Because it feels like a personal attack. That's the way that some people have told me. Like it feels like it hits you right in the, and if you're not ready for that kind of confrontation, but then again, if you're a hopeless case, that might hit you in the feels that you need. So I think that, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I feel like it's we kind of touched on this with Max, our friend Max from Fucking Sober, of Fucking Sober. That we touched on the Spanish speaking meetings and the French speaking meetings, basically meetings in Europe. And it seems like to me, my overall experience has been that if you have the choice of speaking like a language and then English, you would go to the English speaking meetings just to avoid some of the culture
oh,
of like the fellowship in that. Like that's what I experienced in Spain. It's what I saw
Yeah.
in other places in Europe. I'm not sure if it extends. Again, I
Yeah.
don't think it's primarily the translation. It might be, but it's also a cultural thing. If you have a choice between a
yes,
2 hour meeting
Yeah.
and an hour meeting, you might go to the 1 hour meeting,
yeah,
you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, absolutely. And that's a huge thing. And we we touched on that the last time that we spoke, but like meetings in Europe, in my experience when I was I did meetings in both in Germany and in Switzerland. In both places, I did German speaking meetings. And what I found is that in the German speaking meetings, first of all, they would be advertised as AA meetings, but in the preamble, they say, like, in this meeting, we welcome all fellowships because all addictions are the same and all 12 steps are the same. So then in the meeting, you have, I'm ACA, I'm NA, I'm SLAA, I'm an alcoholic. And it's like, these are all very different issues.
yeah.
And,
Yeah.
yeah, like in the local language meetings, that was what I found. Multi-fellowship, very diluted message. And then the English speaking meetings, most of them were great. Most of them were big book based, and all of them were started by American expats.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I feel like we had a whole episode about this
we did. We did.
with
And
Max.
it's easier to just put away the book, that's what I'll say. Like for people who are looking for the solution, as just in English speaking meetings, even, um, we just go back to the book, right? And then there's some flowery language in there, but there's also some very straightforward language. Like it wasn't until a podcast creator than yourself and Rhinos that um, I appreciated what I heard people share, which is the qualification is really that bit in the first paragraph of page 44, right? And yet
Mhm.
there's like chapters devoted to this extended description of the alcoholic. So you can be as precise or as figurative as you want to be just with the English language big book. And if we're talking about fellowship meetings, like they just don't go into the book. The people who don't appreciate that kind of straightforwardness, then that's where you'll have meetings where they're based solely on like the daily reflections, 24 hours a day, living sober. So it's, yeah, it underscores for me the importance of the translation, the language that they're used, but also if people don't like that kind of bluntness, they just put away the book in favor of something else, or just like group therapy.
Yeah.
I mean, I do have to say, some of the daily, I don't know if it's a daily reflections, some of them can be quite blunt. Like whenever I read I get like I'm in way too many groups that have like way too much, shit in them. But like, let's see. So for example, you get like you have the thought of the day, right? And the meditation of the day and the prayer of the day. Do you guys ever look at that? And
No.
it's crazy because the thought of the day is always, um, do you remember when you almost died in a ditch and pissed yourself? And then the meditation of the day would be accept the power of God into your heart and be like all creatures, because you just fell out of a coconut tree or whatever. Very Kamala Harris. But now people can tell when this was recorded.
Yeah, exactly. You gave it away.
Right in the coconut tree mayhem. Oh man, it's great. So what am I saying? Yeah. Here's another thing. I wanted to ask you this. I don't know, Big Book Thumper. I don't have any new ones.
Bookie.
Bookie. Thanks, Mike. Uh, is it true? I've heard this and I have not been able to confirm it. Is it true that like Spanish, for example, has different translations across different countries? Same with French?
I think that might be true. I don't know because I live in a place where Spanish is not the language at all. There just are a lot of Spanish speaking meetings, and I don't even know like if there are different editions for different like that would make sense because normally
That's
that
what I
is the
thought,
case. Like book translations in general are usually like there will be adapted versions to different countries like what I know is that there will always be like Spain Spanish and then
yeah.
for like I don't know for like the big classics or whatever there usually is a Mexican version and a Colombian version, sometimes a Chilean version, and
Oh,
these are like different shades of Spanish that are more adapted.
Yeah.
So that might be the case with the big book, but I really don't know.
It would make sense in my head because again, like to make it very clear in Spanish, it's very different. Like it's the same, but it can be wildly different. Like if someone speaks like Spain Spanish to you,
yeah.
you would immediately like catch up on that in the first sentence they say, right?
Yeah.
So I've tried to find evidence of that. I have not been able to. I found it in Arabic. There's a lot of different versions because Arabic, even more so than Spanish, from my understanding, I don't speak enough Arabic, unfortunately, but is very, very different. There's so many ones. I'm looking right now, like I have them. If you have the time, do yourself a favor and go into the website of AA and check out all the different languages that you had no idea the Big Book was translating to. It's fabulous. But I tried to confirm that and I was unable to. I thought that it was the same thing with French, with Canadian French and France French, but I don't know.
I was
I don't
thinking
think
that
it's the case.
it's great that you
Yeah.
brought that up. That was on my mind. I was wondering if, for example, if you have the French translation of the Big Book, I assume that that's based on like France French, but then if you brought that into like a Quebecois meeting, like if that was going to be interpreted in a different way.
No, I'm pretty sure there is only one French big book and it works for the French speaking areas. Like I'm guessing in French speaking Switzerland and Belgium and in France they would have the same big book as here because written French is very similar kind of all across the board regardless of the dialects or accents. So, somebody from Quebec can read and perfectly understand, anything written in French and vice versa. It's spoken that is violently different.
Ah,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be the same word, but pronounced in a violently different manner.
But then the meaning and the intention will be the same?
For most words, yeah. It's not like Spanish. Like in Spanish, the same word will mean very
Different
different
things,
things
yeah.
to two different countries.
I see.
But in French, I haven't found that to be the case.
Guys, this is fascinating. The more I look at this website, I'm like, okay, I have to point out some things. I think we're in this kind of, should I, Mike, or should I wait with it? What do you
No,
say?
you're
Yala?
excited. Go.
I am, because it's ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. Okay. So, just I have some languages I want to point out, but the Hebrew Big Book, in if you want to, purchase it, it stands at a nice $9.10. Okay. The Japanese Big Book is $34.
Wow.
I don't understand the pricing. It's wild. The Japanese one, the Icelandic one is right in the middle, right? It's $23.
It's quite a difference.
There's a High German and Low German version, if you're interested. There's a Navajo version. There is a Mongolian, Lithuanian, Maltese, which is this language spoken in Malta, not the language spoken by the dog breed. If you know, you know.
Nice.
There's Nepali, Norwegian, Polish, Portuguese, Punjabi, a language that I can't pronounce. The name of, what is that? Rarotongan. That's a
Wow.
language that I don't even know. Russian, Romanian, Sami, Chinese, simplified Chinese, Sinhalese, Slovak, Swahili, Slovenian, which is different than Slovak, Swedish, Tagalog. There we go. The Swedish one is $22. Now, oh man, it got stuck because there was one that was really funny to me that I wanted to point out. Oh, here we go. The Danish one is $26.25, and the Dutch/Flemish one is $29.80. This is so not like, it's like, what is it? It's like, is it, why? Why is the pricing so weird?
Pricing is weird. And I'll say, like, so I had limited experience with my local AA for most of my recovery. I've only been getting involved for like the past 6 months-ish, like very involved locally doing in-person meetings. And I always heard people in the American meetings that I went to on Zoom be like, the big book's $10, big book's a flat $10. It's been a flat $10 for like 20 years. It's not going to change. Big book's a flat $10. So I'm like, okay, big book's a flat $10. And then I go to my local meetings. Big book is fucking $23 here. And I'm like, bro, you Americans lied to me. Like,
dude, I'm like, what? And it's different. It's everywhere because someone can bring it from the States and have like a sale on books. And I don't know how much I got mine for. It doesn't matter. It's already molded over. I'm gonna give it away. There's an Urdu one. Okay, that's the language of Pakistan. Again, all the different variations you have of Arabic. It's so interesting. Like, give yourself some time, go check it out. Not just the fluctuation of prices, but the languages that I've never even heard of. Translate. There's a Zulu one, which is one of the 7,000 official languages of South Africa. Like, just incredible stuff. Like, I don't know. It makes me so giddy and excited. Like, it's amazing. There's so many different translations. I think, how many languages is it translated to? I'm not sure. I know there's a number out there somewhere. Let me Google it.
Number of total translations of the big book.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's already a lot. I understand now if you were going through that list, and now I have a better understanding of your outrage that there's no Yiddish version.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, there's a oh yeah, okay, so I'm sorry, Rarotongan is spoken in the Cook Islands. There are over 70 approved translations. Apparently there are some who are not approved, which I know, being a part of the the literature committees in Israel, I can tell you from personal experience, okay, that
That's
that
funny.
it takes time to approve a translation of literature. Um,
How about letter P? Is plain language of the big book listed as a official translation of
ah,
the website?
so far, Mike, it's been too much of a topic for controversy. That it's not. We'll get a Yiddish version before I believe
What do
We
you
get
mean?
that.
Like it's already been approved. It's already been
Ay,
approved.
vey.
2025 at some point it's coming. I went to all of the conferences. You know that
Did
earlier
you?
this year. Yeah, earlier this year all of the trustees were doing conferences like every weekend different trustees. And I was at the conference when one of the guys broke his NDA because by the way, all of the trustees have NDAs. They can't talk about the specifics, da da da. But I was at the conference when one of the trustees broke his NDA and actually talked about the specifics of like some things that are changed and what they will be changed to. And yeah, but anyway, so I went to all of these things and it's already been approved. It's going to cost the fellowship more than 200K. It is officially viewed as a translation and companion of the
Wow.
original big book because the language in the
Oy.
big book is considered they wanted to bring it down to a grade 5 reading level and the
Got
big
it.
book is not considered grade 5. So that's what this translation will be. It will be a translation of the language in the big book to a grade 5 reading level.
Do you think, honestly, do you think this thing is going to be at some point more widespread than how we recovered with like the, I don't know, fourth edition, third edition, doesn't matter.
I don't think so. I don't think so. But
That's
I
a
don't know.
that's okay. You know, if you asked me yesterday, and this is what's great about this episode for me right now, if you asked me yesterday, that would have been my fear that it would overtake the traditional big book. But then now, having spoken to both of you and then learned about all the different translations that there are, I see it from a more neutral perspective. It's another translation, right? And we can always go back to like the original wording, the original language, once there's a certain level of comprehension that's already been achieved.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean
Yeah.
we've already had like changes in the big book. If you read the original manual versus what was printed in
There we go.
1939, it's a
I was
violent
waiting for
difference.
it.
So, yeah, yeah, I like to be very contrarian to both sides of all
Mm.
issues. Like if I
Yeah.
see my big book people getting too intense, I'll come on in with like this book is meant to be suggestive only. We have no monopoly, And then like when meeting makers are doing their thing, I'll come on in with the big book. But to everybody who's got like a fear about the plain language big book, which at the beginning of the year when I was going to these conferences, I encountered that a lot. Like I saw
Mm.
the fear that members have in the fellowship. It's like we always refer back to the printing of 1939, which is not even the original book that was originally written.
Yeah.
And so, like, let's all pipe the fuck down.
Yeah, let's all calm. Let's all chill the fuck out. Oh man, I get it. I do. I feel like the fear is obviously for people, especially when we're connected to a text, and we spoke about this, Mike, is that it will overtake and that it will kind of water down the message. But newsflash, the message is already watered down,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
I want to believe, and again, when it comes to languages, this miracle, is of a divine nature, recovering from this thing is such a thing that is bigger than a language, like so there's a Braille version of the
Mm.
big book. I've seen it because when you go to the you could see a lot of the books and it's like it's huge, right? Because Braille it takes for like it's very hard to do and it's like a huge thing, right? So I want to believe that if a person, no matter what languages they speak, no matter, even different disabilities, whether they're blind or deaf or have a mental disability, like that this thing could reach beyond our earthly shackles of words. And here we go, bringing it back to the Torah, back to Babylon. Any last words? See what
No,
I did there?
yeah. I mean, that's right on. I go back to what um Thumpy said in the beginning, right, about the fellowship and people saying, like traditionalists, for lack of a better word, saying that no, suit up and show up to a physical meeting. But then that's almost that kind of attitude takes away from the spirit of the solution, like being divinely inspired, right? And thinking that physical presence is what's going to like keep you sober, communicate the message when it can be effectively communicated online the way that we're talking about it right now. And then at the same time, if you rely too much on the words that are being used or the translation, you lose some of the symbolism, that might come into the like the sharing of experience. So it's like the language is, yeah, if anything, I'm coming away with a takeaway that the language is important. I find power in the words, but then it's also like within the language that's being used and how it's communicated. I go back to that episode that we had with Mr. Barleycorn, right? Where I think we all celebrated when he threw in this nugget of even just looking at the steps, right? The steps are not the show, they're the ticket to the show. And so I can't,
Yes.
where in the past, like I might have tried to focus so much on this particular step to be like the tonic that's going to cure my ailments, right? But then it's more in the process of it, something happens. It's like magic.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think every big book person kind of goes through that. Like when you discover the mechanism. I mean, I had that experience and I watched people have that experience of almost worshiping the mechanism. It's like every word is perfect and you have
I
to
love
follow
that.
what every word says. And, and then as you grow in understanding and effectiveness of this power, my experience was that I, more and more like was willing to see that other people are going to have different experiences and that's okay. Like I remember I used to be a member of a very sick group and I was pretty much the only big book person there. And like people would say, like if you're a newcomer, she's a hard ass big book sponsor. And I was like, I'm really not because I know that willingness is like more than ever now. I know that willingness is God given. You will either do this or you will not. And I have no power over how God will come in your life. And I have no power to stand in between you and God no matter what's going to happen. So I'm the most hands-off person. Like today, go
Yeah.
right ahead and ghost me at step 4, baby. That's your journey.
Oh, babe.
And so I feel like I've watched that a lot of big book people have that same transition of going from being on fire with the big book, coming into meetings and be like, you're all sick and I have a solution, to like,
Yeah.
go right ahead, baby.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Oh, Faye. It's such a part of the disillusionment that every person eventually I think has with the program as well after a while of like or you can call it a crisis of faith or whatever of like, oh right, that this fucking comma doesn't fucking matter. You know? Who gives a fuck? Who cares about this guy? Is this comma really worth an hour-long workshop right now? Like it doesn't.
Yeah.
Mike, I feel like can you do a more about the comma episode for us?
More about the comma. I'd have to know like which comma we're talking about.
Oh, there's so many, I suppose.
I was stuck on the lives or lives. Remember
Yeah,
that
yeah.
one?
Jesus Christ, the amount of stuff I heard, and I enjoyed it at the time. I can't even like defend myself. Like, listen, we all go through. You do you. You do your journey. You read, if the big book in Maltese speaks to you and the commas there are great, then go ahead and do that.
Yep.
Was that it, by the way?
I don't care.
All right.
I'm just imagining like paying a sofer stam to write the big book.
Oh my
And
God.
like no one would say yes to it. Oh my God.
That's so funny. That is
I'm
so
just
funny.
imagining the letters.
Yeah.
Mike,
Do it, we
there's like
can.
a thumping noise out of your end.
We ended at the right time because Sunday morning Zumba is happening right across the fucking street. You can hear that